If you're not getting what you want out of life and you feel like you're falling short, you might be interested in the law of attraction or manifestation. And these all fall under the New Thought movement. And Thomas Troward, he was born around 1850. He was one of the earliest thinkers in the New Thought movement. And he went on to inspire people like Neville Goddard, Ernest Holmes, Joseph Murphy, and he actually inspired a lot of the principles within the movie The Secret. So he wrote a series of lectures called the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science. And these talk about the natural principles governing the relationship between mental action and material conditions. So essentially, how to use your mind to get what you want out of life. Spirit and matter. At first, we may dispose to say that livingness consists in the power of motion and deadness in its absence. But a little inquiry into the most recent research of science will soon show us that this distinction does not go deep enough. It is now one of the fully established facts of the physical science that no atom of what we call dead matter is without motion. On the table before me lies a solid lump of steel, but in the light of up-to-date science, I know that the atoms of the seemingly inert mass are vibrating with the most intense energy, continually dashing hither and thither, impinging upon and rebounding from one another, or circling around like miniature solar systems with a ceaseless rapidity whose complex activity is enough to bewilder the imagination. The mass as a mass may lie inert upon the table, but so far from being destitute of the element of motion, it's the abode of the never-tiring energy moving the particles with a swiftness to which the speed of an express train is nothing. It is therefore not the mere fact of motion that is at the root distinction of which we draw distinctively between spirit and matter. We must go deeper than that. The solution of the problem will never be found by comparing life with that what we call deadness. And the reason for this will become apparent later on. But the true key is found by comparing one degree of livingness with another. So the foundationing statement is that we have spirit and matter. But what he's saying is that what we believe is dead is not actually dead, because what is dead matter, let's say, there is still atoms moving within it at a rapid speed of motion, faster than a bullet train. So this is the foundation principle. So then he goes on to say that we need to judge it by its degree of livingness. We shall always find that what we call livingness of any individual life is ultimately measured by its intelligence. This is very powerful. It is the possession of a greater intelligence that places the animal higher on the scale of being than that of the plant, the man higher than that of the animal, the intellectual man higher than that of the savage. The increased intelligence calls into activity modes of motion of a higher order corresponding to itself. The higher the intelligence, the more completely the mode of motion is under its control. And as we descend in the scale of intelligence, the descent is marked by a corresponding increase in automatic motion not subject to the control of self-conscious intelligence. The descent is a gradual from the expanded self-recognition of the highest human personality to that lowest order visible forms which you speak of as things, and from which self-recognition is entirely absent. We see then that the livingness of life consists in intelligence, in other words, in the power of thought. And we may therefore say that the distinctive quality of spirit is thought. And as the opposite to this, we may say that the distinctive quality of matter is form. We cannot conceive of matter without form. So the degrees of intelligence are going to determine the livingness of the thing. This is really important. The higher the degree of livingness, the more intelligence it's going to have. Whereas the lower degree of intelligence it's going to have, the lower degree of livingness it has. That's why the humans are on the higher scale than that of the plant, because we have intelligence, whereas the plant is intelligence, but it's not able to control its own intelligence as much as a human can. Form implies extension in space and also limitation within certain boundary, right? This is important. Form implies extension in space and also limitation within certain boundaries. So what they're saying is form, when we create form, it's implying limitation. Thought implies neither. When therefore we think of life as existing in any particular form, we associate it with the idea of extension in space. So that an elephant may be said to consist of a vastly large amount of living substance than a mouse. But if we think of life as a livingness, we do not associate it with any idea of extension. And we at once realize that the mouse is quite as much alive as the elephant, withstanding the difference in size. The important point of this distinction is that we can conceive of anything as devoid of the element of extension in space. It must be present in all entire totality, anywhere and everywhere. That is to say, at every point of space simultaneously. So this intelligence, this spirit that underlies all things is in all places at every given moment. This is what they're saying is, regardless if we look at the elephant or we look at the mouse, the same degree of spirit is within all things. The livingness is within all things. When the elements of time and space are eliminated, all of our ideas of things must necessarily be subsisting in a universal here and everlasting now. What I love about this is when we get rid of the time and space, we recognize that everything exists here and now, and that is within the thought. The higher mode of the intelligence controls the lower. This is very powerful. We have seen that the descent from personality as we know it in ourselves to matter as we know it under all what we call inanimate forms is a gradual descent in the scale of intelligence from that mode of being, which is able to realize its own willpower as a capacity for originating new trains of causation, to that mode of being which is incapable of recognizing itself at all. So what I love about this is the greater the degree of intelligence a life form has, the ability it has to be able to create a causation, a cause of effects. Whereas the lower degree is unable to use its willpower. It's reacting to its environment. The higher the grade of life, the higher the intelligence, from which it follows that the supreme principle of life must be the ultimate principle of intelligence. So the supreme principle of life is intelligence. This is clearly demonstrated by the grand order of the universe. There is a marked distinction between the cosmic intelligence and the individual intelligence, and that the factor which differentiates the latter from the former is a presence of individual volition. So we have a cosmic intelligence and we have individual intelligence. It's all connected to a degree, but the individual intelligence has a degree of volition, willpower. So volition is essentially willpower. The individual has willpower, whereas the cosmic intelligence doesn't have this willpower. What differentiates the higher from the lower degree of intelligence is the recognition of its own selfhood. And the more intelligent that recognition is, the greater will be the power. The lower degree of self-recognition is that which only realizes itself as an entity separate from all other entities, as the ego distinguished from the non-ego. But the higher degree of self-recognition is that which, realizing its own spiritual nature, sees in all other forms not so much the non-ego or that which is not itself as the alter ego or that which is itself in a different mode of expression. Now, it is the higher degree of self-recognition that is the power by which the mental scientist produces his results. See, what I love about this is by you understanding the spiritual nature within you, you're going to be able to produce the greatest level of results. This is so powerful stuff here. For this reason, it is imperative that he should clearly understand the difference between form and being, that one is the mode of the relative and the mark of subjection to conditions, and that other is that of truth, of the absolute and now which controls conditions. Now, this higher recognition of self as an individuation of pure spirit must of necessity control all modes of spirit which have not yet reached the same level of recognition. These lower modes of spirit are in bondage to their law of their own being because they do not know the law, and therefore the individual who has attained to this knowledge can control them through that law. So to the degree that you can recognize the spiritual nature within you, the spirit within everything around you within you is going to be to the degree you're going to be able to control things that haven't recognized the spirit within them as yet. The ultimate foundation of every form of matter is spirit, and hence that universal intelligence subsists throughout nature inherent in every one of its manifestations. So the ultimate foundation of everything around you is spirit, and it's found in every one of its manifestations. Nothing is devoid of spirit. Spirit lies within. The unity of spirit. We have now paved the way for the understanding of what is meant by the unity of spirit. In the first conception of the spirit as the underlying origin of all things, we see a universal substance which at this stage is not differentiated into any specific form. So there is a unity that underlies all things. It's undifferentiated. This is not a question of some biogone time, but subsists at every moment of all time in the innermost nature of all being. And when we see this, we see that the division between one specific form and another has below it a deep essential unity. So below everything, when you look at the underlying essence of it, there's all connection, which acts as a supporter of all the several forms of individuality arising out of it. So everything at its fundamental essence has spirit, and the different forms of manifestation come from this spirit. And as our thought penetrates deeper into the nature of this all-producing spiritual substance, we see that it cannot be limited to any portion in space, but it must be limitless as space itself, and that the idea of any portion of space where it is not is inconceivable. So spirit is through every mode of space. It is one of those intuitive perceptions from which the human mind can never get away, that this primordial, all-generating living spirit must be commensurate with infinitude, and that we can therefore never think of otherwise than as universal infinite. So this underlying spirit is universal or infinite. It underlies all things. There is a unity. Now, it is a mathematical truth that the infinite must be a unity. So the infinite must be a unity. You cannot have two infinitudes, for then neither would be infinite. Each would be limited by the other, nor can you split up the infinite into fractions. The infinite is mathematically essential unity, right? This is a point on which too much stress cannot be laid, for there follow from it the most important consequences. Unity, as such, can neither be multiplied nor divided, for either operation destroys the unity. So as soon as we believe in separation, there's no such thing as unity, but unity underlies all things, so we've got a delusion there. Now, the great fact to be recognized about unity is that because it is a single unit, wherever it is, the whole of it must be. The moment we allow our mind to wander off the idea of extension in space and time and say that one part of the unit is here and another there, we have descended from the idea of unity into that of parts or fractions of a single unit, which is to pass into the idea of multiplicity of the smaller units. And in that case, we're dealing with the relative or the relation subsisting between two or more entities, which are therefore limited by each other and so have passed out of the region of simple unity, which is the absolute. So if you understand this, is as soon as we create separation between unity and create duality, we're creating limitation, because in unity is infinite. And if there's infinite in unity, that means there are limitless possibilities. But as soon as we create separation between I and another, what happens is we're creating limited things. It is therefore a mathematical necessity that because the originating life principle is infinite, it is a single unit, and consequently, wherever it is at all, the whole of it must be present. But because it is infinite or limitless, it is everywhere, and therefore it follows the whole of spirit must be present at every point in space at the same moment. So spirit is everywhere at every given moment, it is right now. The knowledge of this fact regarding the spirit is a base of all conscious spiritual operation, and therefore, in proportion to our increasing recognition of it, our power of producing outward visible result by the action of our thought will grow. So to the degree that you're able to recognize the spirit within, you're going to be able to use your thoughts to create the material conditions of your life. So we're talking about the law of attraction and manifestation. But if you do not believe in this spirit that underlies all things, there's this underlying unity of all things, you're not going to be able to use this power. But the degree that you're able to recognize this spirit, this underlying unity of all things, you're going to be able to use the law of attraction and manifestation to draw things into your life. This is what he's saying. He goes very deep from the beginning, but as you can see, we're starting to unwind the law of attraction here. Subjective and objective mind. The great truth which the science of hypnotism has brought to light is the dual nature of the human mind. There's a subjective mind and the objective mind. And they're saying hypnotism is a great opening factor to this because through hypnotism, we're able to see both minds at play. Whatever personality the objective mind impresses upon it, which is the subjective mind, that personality it assumes and acts upon too. And since it is the builder of the body, it will build up the body in correspondence with the personality thus impressed upon it. So whatever the objective mind impresses upon the subjective mind is going to build that out of the body. The subjective mind builds, it is the creator. These two laws of the subjective mind form the foundation of the axiom that our body represents the aggregate of our beliefs. So you understand that your body is nothing but the belief systems that you have, because your body, you have a belief, your belief comes from your objective mind to your subconscious mind, and then your subconscious mind or your subjective mind builds your body. If we realize that the subjective mind is the builder of the body, and that the body is subject to no influences except those which reach it through the subjective mind, then what we have to do is impress this upon the subjective mind and habitually think of it as a fountain of perpetual life, which is continually renovating the body by building in strong and healthy material, in the most complete independence of any influences of any sort, save those of our own desire impressed upon our own subjective mind by our own thought. When we fully grasp these considerations, we shall see that this is just as easy to externalize healthy conditions of the body as the contrary. So, through our objective mind, we're able to impress things upon our subjective mind, and that subjective mind is going to build it out in the body. But we can build things up to build us or destroy us. An intelligent consideration of the phenomena of hypnotism will show us that what we call the hypnotic state is a normal state of the subjective mind. So when someone is hypnotized, they're in a receiving state, and this is essentially where the subjective mind lies. It lies in this receiving state. It always conceives of itself in accordance with some suggestion conveyed to it, either consciously or unconsciously to the mode of the objective mind which governs it, and it gives rise to the corresponding external results. Manifestation, law of attraction. So your subjective mind is lying in a hypnotic state all of the time. It's waiting to receive suggestions, to act out those suggestions. Whether you do it through your own objective mind or that of others, it's up to you. But the subjective mind is going to create that what you want, or that is what is being suggested to it in no other form. It becomes therefore a question of the highest importance to determine in every case what the nature of the suggestion shall be and from what source it shall proceed. So again, where are your suggestions coming from, to your subconscious mind or your subjective mind? This is very, very important, because if the suggestions are coming from outside influences, your body and your environment is going to be made as a result of the outside opinions and your environment around you, not based upon your own impression on that subjective mind. The individual subjective mind may therefore be regarded as the organ of the absolute, in precisely the same way that the objective mind is the organ of the relative. So the subjective mind, right, the subjective mind or subconscious mind is actually an organ of the absolute, the spirit that underlies all things. Whereas the objective mind is the organ of the relative. So the relative is you, your physical person. And in order to regulate our use of these two organs, it is necessary to understand what the term absolute and relative actually mean. The absolute is the idea of the thing which contemplates it as existing in itself and not in relating to something else. That is to say, which contemplates the essence of it. And the relative is that of a thing which contemplates it as related to other things, that is to say, as circumscribed by a certain environment. The absolute is the region of causes, and the relative is a region of conditions, and hence if we wish to control conditions, this can only be done by our thought power operating the plane of the absolute, which it can do only through the medium of the subjective mind. See, what I love about this is the relative is the plane of conditions, right? Whereas the absolute is the plane of causes. So if you want to create the conditions around you, if you want to create the environment around you, you need to go to the plane of the absolute, which doesn't see duality. As soon as you see duality, you're working from the place of the effect, you are the condition. But if you don't see duality and you are essentially playing at the plane of the absolute, the unity, when you see this underlying spirit that underlies all things, when you're playing at this level, you can impress upon it through your subconscious mind and get the result that you want in life. This is what he's saying. But as soon as we see duality, separation in I and another, what that is doing is limiting your potential to impress upon that subjective mind to create what you want in life. All things whatsoever ye pray and ask for, believe that ye have received them, and you shall receive them. The difference of the tenses in this passage is remarkable. The speaker bids us to first believe that our desire has already been fulfilled, that it is a thing already accomplished, and that its accomplishment will follow as a thing in the future. So by you having this desire or this belief within, you need to believe it already exists here and now, and it's going to come. This is nothing else than a concise direction for making use of the creative power of thought by impressing upon the universal subjective mind the particular thing which we desire as an already existing in fact. So what he's saying here is we use our objective mind to impress that on the universal subjective mind, the thing that we want as it exists here and now. This is what we're doing. We're talking about the law of attraction and manifestation, but we need to be connected with the unity, the universe, the spirit to be able to do this. In following this direction, we are thinking on the plane of the absolute and eliminating from our minds all considerations of conditions. Conditions is the relative, which imply limitation and the possibility of adverse contingencies. And we are thus planting a seed which, if left undisturbed, will infallibly germinate to external fruition. So again, by you having the desire and believing that it exists here and now, it's going to germinate, it's going to come to fruition. But if we start to create conditions through the relative duality, we create conditions, if then but can't, what's going to happen is we're going to limit the ability for this to come to fruition. If you can see it in your mind, you're going to be able to hold it in your hand. That's what Bob Proctor used to say. By thus making intelligent use of our subjective mind, we, so to speak, create a nucleus, which is sooner created than it begins to exercise an attractive force drawing to itself material of a like character with its own. And if this process is allowed to go on undisturbed, so who's going to disturb it? You're going to disturb it. It will continue until an external form corresponding to the nature of the nucleus comes out into manifestation on the plane of the objective and the relative. This is a universal method of nature on every plane. See, what I love about this is when you impress something on your subconscious mind, you're creating a nucleus. A nucleus, let's say, has all the DNA to be able to create the tree, the plant, the human being. If you think about a sperm and an egg and we create a baby, right? We're creating a baby. When the moment of the conception happens, right, what happens is that has the nucleus, all the DNA to be able to create the human body. And the same thing is by you implanting the desire on your subconscious mind, that spirit, that nucleus has the DNA to be able to create that thing. As long as we don't get in the way of it, we need to allow it to happen. We can't get in the way. We need to allow the universe to do its thing. This is very powerful. We say that the action of the mind plants that nucleus, which if allowed to grow undisturbed, will eventually attract itself all the conditions necessary for its manifestation in outward visible form. So again, you create this nucleus by planting that thought in your mind, and that's going to attract things to you, and it's going to come in visible form. Now, the only action of the mind is thought, and it is this for this reason that by our thoughts we create corresponding external conditions, because we thereby create the nucleus which attracts to itself its own correspondence in due order until the finished work is manifested on the external plane. I love this. It's so deep. So this is the law of attraction deep. Our thought of anything forms a spiritual prototype of it, thus constituting a nucleus or center of attraction for all conditions necessary to its eventual externalization by a law of growth inherently in the prototype itself. So by you having a thought, having a desire, having a dream, having a wish, you're creating a spiritual prototype. So that's a spiritual prototype on a different plane of that thing. That spiritual prototype has a nucleus. That nucleus has a DNA that starts to attract the condition of the environment to make that thing externalize itself. This is very, very important. The law of growth. No doubt, the greater the vitality we put into the germ, which we have agreed to call the spiritual prototype, the quicker it will germinate. But this is simply because by a more realized conception, we put more growing power into the seed that we do by a feebler conception. So again, this comes back to how bad do you want the thing that you're dreaming about? Because if you don't want it bad enough, you're not going to have the vitality to bring it to fruition fast enough. You need to have the reasons why. Why do you want this thing? And create this crystal clear image within your mind. And by creating that crystal clear image within your mind, the reasons why, you're going to be able to put that vitality into that seed, which is that spiritual prototype that creates a nucleus that has the DNA to start to attract the things into your life to make that come to fruition. The principle of growth is that of inherent vitality in the seed itself, and that the operations of the garden have the exact analog in mental science. We do not put the self-expansive vitality in the seed, but we must sow it. And we may also, so to speak, water it by quietly concentrated contemplation of our desire as an actual accomplished fact. So we need to believe that this thing is already happened. But we must carefully remove from such contemplation every idea of a strenuous effort on our part to make the seed grow. So strenuous effort is the belief in doubt, challenges, it's going to be hard. We need to believe as soon as we plant this seed within our mind, as a seed, as a tree grows naturally with water and sunshine and rain, the dream, the thoughts that you're holding within your mind, the spiritual prototype is going to come to fruition effortlessly. This is what we're saying. Receptivity. I am not the other because I am myself. This is a definition of individual selfhood, but it is necessarily imparts the idea of limitation, because a recognition of any other individuality at once affirms a point at which our own individuality ceases and the other begins. So if we think about this underlying absolute of unity, unity means everything is connected by spirit. But as soon as we create individuality, I am not the other, what we're doing is we're creating a limitation. This is so powerful stuff here. Now, this mode of recognition cannot be attributed to the universal mind. The universal mind is limitless. For it to recognize a point where itself ceased and something else began would be to recognize itself as not universal. For the meaning of universality is the including of all things. And therefore, for this intelligence to recognize that anything as being outside itself would be a denial of its own being. So as soon as we create separation, we're denying the spirit within. This is very powerful. We may therefore say without hesitation that whatever may be the nature of its intelligence, it must be entirely devoid of the element of self-recognition as an individual personality on any scale whatsoever. Seen in this light, it is at once clear that the originating, all-pervading spirit is in the grand impersonal principle of life, which gives rise to all the particular manifestations of nature. So underlying all things, there is this underlying unity, this spirit that underlies all things, and this thing creates all manifestations, but there's no separations between anything in the universe. As soon as we create separation, we create limitation, whereas the unity, the absolute, is limitless. This is very powerful. We must realize that this universal spirit permeates all space and all manifested substance, just as physical scientists tell us that the ether does, and whatever it is, there must carry with it all that is in its own being, and we shall then see that we are in the midst of an ocean of undifferentiated yet intelligent life above, below, and all around, and permeating ourselves both mentally, corporeally, and all other beings as well. It's everywhere. Gradually, as we come to realize the truth of this statement, our eyes will begin to open to its immense significance. It means that all nature is pervaded by an interior personalness, infinite in its potentialities of intelligence, responsiveness, and power of expression, and only by waiting to be called into activity by a recognition of it. By the terms of this nature, it can respond to us only as we recognize it. So, you have to understand that there is spirit within all things. There is no separation. Separation is limitation, whereas unity is limitless. This is so powerful. There is an underlying essence of all things, and this is spirit. This pervades all things, and this has you within it. There is no separation between you and the other individual. The laws of nature cannot be altered in the least degree, but we can come into such a realization of our own relation to the universal principle of law that underlies them as to be able to press all particular laws, whether of the visible or the invisible side of nature, into our service, and also find ourselves masters of the situation. So to the degree that you're able to understand this law of the unity of the spirit, you're going to be able to master the situation around you. This will be accomplished by knowledge, and only knowledge which will affect this purpose in all its measureless immensity is a knowledge of the personal element of this universal spirit in its reciprocity to our own personality. So the universal spirit is going to, I guess, mold and make itself based upon our individual personality. Our recognition of this spirit must be therefore twofold, as a principle of necessary sequence, order or law, and also as a principle of intelligence, responsiveness to our own recognition of it. So the universe is going to respond to your realization of the spirit, and it's going to be able to manifest what you want based upon your recognition of the spirit. This is cool stuff. Reciprocal action of the universal and the individual minds. We should expect to find between the individual and the cosmic mind on the supposition that the cosmic mind is subjective mind, and for the reason already given, we can regard it as no other line. So the cosmic mind is the subjective mind, right? As a subjective mind, it must reproduce exactly the conception of itself which the objective mind of the individual acting through his own subjective mind impresses on it, and at the same time As a creative mind, it builds up external facts and correspondent with it is this conception. So the universal mind, this universal mind is subjective, and we have our own subjective mind, and by us impressing thoughts on our subjective mind, which is connected to the universal subjective mind, the corresponding facts and resources start to draw these things to reality. Each one externalizes in his outward circumstances precisely his idea of the universal mind. And the man who realizes by the natural law of the mind he can bring the universal mind to perfect reciprocal action with its own will on the one hand make it a source of infinite instruction, and on the other hand a source of infinite power. So to the degree that you recognize what you can do with these things is going to be to the degree of the power that you have. He will thus wisely alternate the personal and impersonal aspects respectively between his individual mind and the universal mind. When he is seeking for guidance or strength, he will regard his own personal mind as the impersonal element, which is to receive personality from the superior wisdom of the greater mind. So you can draw wisdom from the subjective mind of this universal mind, the universe, right? And when on the other hand, he is to give out the stores thus accumulated, he must reverse the position and consider his own mind as a personal element and the universal mind as the impersonal, which he can therefore direct with certainty by impressing his own personal desires upon it. So you can direct the subjective mind of the universal mind by impressing your thoughts through your objective mind upon your subconscious mind. We need not be staggered at the greatness of this conclusion, for it follows necessarily from the natural relation between the subjective and the objective minds, and the only question is whether we limit our view to the law of the latter or expand it to take limitless possibilities which the subjective mind presents to us. So the subjective mind within our individual being is limitless because it's connected with the universal mind through the subjective mind. And to the degree that we're able to realize this is going to be to the degree that we're going to be able to use the law of attraction and manifestation to draw things into our lives. If the operation of thought power were confined exclusively to the individual mind, this difficulty might arise. But if there is one lesson the student of mental science should take to heart more than any other, it is that the action of thought power is not limited to a circumscribed individuality. What the individual does is to give direction to something which is unlimited, to call into action a force infinitely greater than his own, which, because it in itself is impersonal thought intelligent, will receive the impress of his personality and can therefore make its influence felt far beyond the limits which can be bound by the individual objective perception of the circumstance which he has to deal with. Love this. Your object is to not run the whole cosmos, but to draw particular benefits, physical, mental, moral, or financial, into your own or someone else's life. From this individual point of view, the universal creative power has no mind of its own, and therefore you can make up its mind for it. I love this. When its mind is thus made up for it, it never abrogates its place as a creative power, but at once sets to work to carry out the purpose for which it is thus being concentrated. And unless this concentration is dissipated by some agency, yourself again, right, which it first produced, it will work on the law of growth to complete manifestation of the outward plane. See, really think about this. Who's getting in the way of you and your dreams? It is your objective mind. The subconscious mind acts out through the universal mind to draw things to you. But the only thing that's stopping you is your objective mind through your own limiting beliefs. In dealing with this great impersonal intelligence, we are dealing with the infinite, and we must fully realize the infinitude as which touches all points. And if it does, there should be no difficulty in understanding that this intelligence can draw together means requisite for its purpose, even from the ends of the world. The resource is going to come from you from everywhere. And therefore, realizing the law according to which the result can be produced, we must resolutely put aside all questioning as to the specific means which will be employed to any case. To question this is to sow the very seed of doubt, which is in our first object to eradicate, and our intellectual endeavor should therefore be directed not to the attempt to foretell the various secondary causes, which will eventually combine to produce the desired result, laying down before what particular causes should be necessary and from what quarter they should come. But we should direct our intellectual endeavor to seeing more clearly the rationale of the governing law by which trains and secondary causes are set in motion. We don't need to worry about how our dreams are going to come to fruition, right? This is what he's saying here, is we just need to believe in the spiritual prototype, and then we need to set aside our judgment, our objective mind, and let the subjective mind of ourselves as the individual and the subjective mind of the universal mind to do their things, because they're going to bring you the resources from all over the world to draw to you the things that need to happen. Causes and conditions. Primary causation is the power to initiate a train of causation directed to an individual purpose. As the power of initiating a fresh consequence of cause and effect, it is the first cause. And as referring to an individual purpose, it is relative, and it may therefore be spoken as a relative first cause, or the power of primary causation manifested by the individual. The understanding and use of this power is the whole object of mental science, and it is therefore necessary that the student should clearly see the relation between causes and conditions. So the primary first cause is essentially the underlying element of the law of mental science. The person who wants to use the law of attraction and manifestation, you need to understand the primary causation. Primary causation starts from your thoughts, from the individual, from you. Conditions, however, whether positive or negative, are no sooner called into existence than they become causes in their own turn and produce further conditions, and so ad infinitum, thus giving rise to the whole train of secondary causes. So as long as we judge only from the information conveyed to us by the outward senses, we are working on the plane of secondary causation and see nothing but a succession of conditions, forming part of an endless train of antecedent conditions coming out of the past and stretching way into the future. And from this point of view, we are under the rule of the iron destiny from which there seems to be no possible escape. So you have causes and conditions, or cause and effect. The conditions, if we see the world as only the effects of a link in the chain, and we stay in this, we're a slave to our environment. We're a slave to the world around us. But if we can become a primary first causer, we can change the conditions around us. Now, the only way of escaping is by rising out of the region of secondary causes, rising up, getting above the causes, into that of primary causation, becoming the first cause, where the originating energy is to be found before it yet has passed into manifestation as a condition. This region is to be found within ourselves. It is the region of pure ideas, the imagination, and is there for this reason that I have laid stress on the two aspects of spirit as pure thought and manifested form. The thought, image, or ideal pattern of a thing is the first cause relative to that thing. It is the substance of that thing untrammeled by an antecedent conditions. So essentially, your thought that you have, the images that you hold, your spiritual prototype, that is the first cause. So in order for you to create the law of attraction and manifestation, you need to become a first causer. You can't be the condition, you can't be the effect of your environment, you need to be the first causer. If we realize that all visible things must have their origin in spirit, then the whole creation around us is this standing evidence that the starting point of all things is in the thought, images, or ideas. For no other action than the formation of such images can be conceived of a spirit prior to manifestation in matter. If then, this is a spirit's modus operandi for self-expression, we have only to transfer this conception from the scale of the cosmic spirit working on the plane of the universal to that of the individual spirit working on the plane of the particular. To see that the formation of an ideal image means by that our thought is setting the first cause in motion with regard to this specific object. There is no difference in kind between the operation of the first cause in the universal and in the particular. The difference is only in the difference of scale, but the power itself is identical. So the power of the universe, the universal spirit, the subjective mind of the universe, is no difference between the power that you have. We must therefore always be very clear as to whether we are consciously using the first cause or not. So again, are you an automaton going through the environment like a robot, or are you being the first causer to create the conditions that you want in your life? Conditions are never causes in themselves, but only subsequent links of a chain start on the plane of the pure ideal. The conditions, they all began within the mind. What we have to do is to reverse our method of thinking and regard the ideal as the real. So the ideal that we have is the real. And the outward manifestation is the mere reflection of which must change with every change of the object which casts it. By you having the ideal, by you having that image, by using your imagination, you can create the material forms, the manifestations in your world. An ideal as such cannot be formed in the future. It must either be formed here and now or not be formed at all. And it is for this reason that every teacher who has ever spoken with the due knowledge of the subject has impressed upon his followers the necessity of picturing themselves to have fulfilled their desires as already accomplished on the spiritual plane, as the indispensable condition of fulfillment is in the visible and concrete. So you need to believe it as if you can see it right now, that you're already holding it within your heart. This is so important. When this is properly understood, any anxious thought as to the means to be employed in the accomplishment of our purpose is seen to be quite unnecessary. If the end is already secured, then it follows that all the steps leading to be secured also. So you can hold that image in your mind. That means it already exists somewhere on the plane. That means that the steps are already can get taken in order to make that thing create reality. The means will pass into the smaller circle of our conscious activities day by day in due order. And then we have to work upon them, not with fear, doubt, or feverish excitement, but calmly and joyously, because we know that the end is already secured. And that is our reasonable use of such means as present themselves in the desired direction is only one portion of a much larger coordinated movement, the final result which admits of no doubt. So again, if you can hold this image, this ideal within your mind, it exists somewhere here and now on a plane. That means if it exists here and now, the steps are already laid to be able to come that to fruition. It's already going to come. You just need to believe and it's going to come to fruition. In actual practice, we must first form an ideal conception of our object with the definite intention of impressing it upon the universal mind. It is in this intention which makes such a thought out of the region of the mere causal fancies, and then affirm that our knowledge of the law is sufficient reason for a calm expectation of a corresponding result, and that therefore all unnecessary conditions will come in due order. So everything's going to come to you. You need to impress it through your objective mind, to your subconscious mind, and that connects with the universal mind. We can then turn to the affairs of our daily life with a calm assurance that the initial conditions are either hit there already or will soon come to view. If you do not once see them, let us rest content with the knowledge that the spiritual prototype is already in existence and wait till some circumstance pointing in the desired direction begins to show itself. There's an element of Eastern philosophy here. They talk about setting an intention and then allowing it, and not forcing, and then it's going to come to you, all in good time. The recognition here is that it's going to come to you. Whatever your desire is, all in good time, it's going to come to fruition with you. This is what he's saying. We don't want to force it. We're trying not to force it. We're trying not to force the reality. Intuition. We have seen that the subjective mind is amenable to suggestion by the objective mind, but there is also an action of the subjective mind upon the objective. The individual subjective mind in his own innermost self, and the first care is the maintenance of individuality, which is the foundation, and since it is pure spirit, it has a continual existence on that plane of being where all things subsist in the universal here and everlasting now, and consequently can inform the lower mind of things removed from its ken either by distance or futurity. So the subjective mind exists in the here and now. That means it can remind you of things in the past or the future are going to come to fruition now through the intuition, yeah? As the absence of the conditions of time and space must logically concentrate all things into present focus, we can assign no limit to the subjective mind's power of perception. And therefore the question arises, why does it not keep the objective mind continually informed at all points? And the answer is that it would do so if the objective mind was sufficiently trained to recognize the inclinations given, and to effect this training is one of the purposes of mental science. So again, the intuition can let you know about the past and the future, and it gives you guidance, right? But the objective mind needs to be able to train to be able to receive this wisdom. When at once we recognize the position of the subject in mind as a supporter of the whole individuality, we cannot doubt that much of what we take to be the spontaneous movement of the objective mind has its origin in the subjective mind prompting the objective mind in the direction without being consciously aware of it. So even though you believe that you're thinking, that is all happening through the subconscious mind. It's prompting your mind to think and take action. But at times when the urgency of the case seems to demand it, or when, for some reason yet unknown, the objective mind is for a while more closely in rapport with the subjective mind, the inferior voice is heard strongly and persistently, and when this is the case, we do well to pay heed to it. So the more that you're able to work with your intuition, the more that the inner voice is going to start to come from within, and when you can start to listen to this inner voice, this is going to guide your life like crazy, right? This is very, very powerful. If you can listen to your intuition and live your life through intuition, very powerful. The importance of understanding and following the intuition cannot be exaggerated, but I candidly admit the great practical difficulty of keeping the happy mean between the disregard of the interior voice and allowing ourselves to be run away with groundless fancies. The best guide is knowledge that comes from personal experience, which gradually leads to the acquisition of a sort of inward sense of touch that enables us to distinguish the true from the false, and which appears to grow with a sincere desire for the truth and with the recognition of the spirit as its source. So you can train your intuition. This is really important. You can train your intuition, but you need to recognize it as spirit, but you need to guide it and listen to this voice within. A lot of the time, if the voice on the outside gets so big, we can't hear the voice on the inside. Our very first impression of a feeling on a subject is generally correct. Why is that? Because it comes from our intuition. It comes from the inner voice. Before the objective mind has begun to argue the subject, it is like the surface of a smooth lake which clearly reflects the light from above. So again, the first impression of something is like a smooth lake. It reflects pure spirit. It reflects the truth. But as soon as it begins to argue from outside appearance, these throw their reflection upon the surface so that the original image becomes blurred and is no longer recognizable. As soon as we put the objective mind into it, we start to cloud the intuition, we start to cloud the inner voice. So the best thing to do is listen to your heart, the voice within. Sometimes it just pops to you, and when it pops to you, you know what you need to do. There's no doubt in your mind, and you're just certain and you move forward. Healing. Now, the principle universally laid down by all mental healers, in whatever various terms they may explain it, is that the basis of all healing is a change in belief. The sequence from which the result is as follows. The subjective mind is the creative faculty within us and creates whatever the objective mind impresses upon it. The objective mind or intellect impresses its thought upon it. The thought is the expression of the belief. Hence, whatever the subjective mind creates is a reproduction externally of our beliefs. So your beliefs, right, the beliefs that you have, pop up to your objective mind. Those objective mind then goes to your subjective mind. That subjective mind creates your body, or it heals your body, or it creates disease. This is really, really important. So your beliefs are the foundation that is going to build you up or destroy you. The beliefs that you have within. This is what he's saying, the beliefs. The only conception you can have of yourself in the absolute or unconditioned is as purely living spirit, not hampered by conditions of any sort, and therefore not subject to illness. And when this idea is firmly impressed upon the subconscious mind, it will externalize it. So once you believe that you are nothing but spirit, and that is a deep lodged belief within, illness is not going to come and affect you. This is what he's saying. The reason why this process is not always successful at first attempt is that in our life we've been holding the false belief in sickness as a substantial entity in ourselves, and thus being a primary cause, instead of being purely merely a negative condition resulting from the absence of a primary cause. And a belief which has become ingrained from childhood cannot be eradicated at a moment's notice. What I love about this, when we talk about healing and sickness and disease, when you look at the people that are most inspired by life, the people that are most influential, the people that are on purpose, the people that are doing what they love, they don't get sick, they don't have time to get sick. Their spirit is so powerful, vibrating at such a high rate that the body doesn't even contemplate sickness, right? And because the body doesn't even contemplate sickness, the body keeps doing its thing. The will. The truth is that man never creates anything. His function is not to create, but to combine and distribute that which is already in being. And what we call our creations are new combinations of already existing material, whether mental or corporal. So everything that exists here and now has always existed here and now. This is very, very powerful to think, because think about, if we go back 5,000 years ago, if someone held the thought of the phone within their mind, they would have been able to create it 5,000 years ago, right? And this is the thing, because everything exists in the universe now to create everything that you want. Anything that you can hold in your mind, everything exists in the universe to create it. And all you're doing is creating different combinations of elements to be able to draw this thing to you. We may say that the imagination is a creative function. We may call the will the centralizing principle. So your imagination is a creative function. Your thoughts, your ideas, your dreams, that is a creative function. But your will is a centralizing principle. Its function is to keep the imagination centered in the right direction. So you have your imagination, you have your thoughts, your ideas. Your will is designed to keep your mind centered on that ideal, that dream. We are aiming at consciously controlling our mental powers instead of letting them hurry us hither and thither in a purposeless manner. And we must therefore understand the relationship of these powers to each other for the production of the external results. First, the whole train of causation is started by some emotion which gives rise to a desire. Next, the judgment determines whether we shall externalize this desire or not. Then, having a desire, having been approved by the judgment, right, what happens? The will comes forward and directs the imagination to form the necessary spiritual prototype. So the will creates the spiritual prototype of the thing that you want. And the imagination that's centered on the particular object creates a spiritual nucleus. So then there's a spiritual nucleus, which in turn acts as a center around which the forces of attraction begin to work and continue to operate until, by the law of growth, the concrete results becomes perceptible to our external senses. The business of the will then is to retain the various faculties of our mind in the position where they are really doing the work we wish. So what I love about this is you have your spiritual prototype. Your willpower is the ability to focus on that spiritual prototype to create that nucleus, which has the DNA to start to draw the things, to attract those things, to create them in your material world, to externalize themselves. How powerful is this stuff? The willpower, when transferred from the region of the lower mentality to the spiritual plane, becomes a simple, calm, and peaceful determination to retain a certain mental attitude in spite of all temptations to the contrary, knowing that by doing so, the desired result will certainly appear. What I love about this is, when you think about the people that are enlightened or on purpose, they don't even need to use their willpower. Their willpower, it's so certain, it's so calm, it's so peaceful, they just have this expectation that things are going to work out and they just do their thing. So the more certain you get, the more advanced you get, the more enlightened you become, the less willpower you need to use because you're on purpose. And you know that things are just going to come to you effortlessly because you're using the natural laws of the universe. The training of the will and its transference from the lower to the higher plane of our nature among the first objects of mental science. We need to learn how to use the willpower. The man is summed up by his will. Whatever he does by his own will is his own act. So if you use your will, it's your own actions. Whatever he does without consent of his will, it is not his own act, but the power of which his will was coerced. So your will can be affected by the environment around you. But we must recognize that on the mental plane, no other individuality can obtain control over our will unless we first allow it to do so. So you have the willingness to allow or not allow it to control you. And so for this reason, that all legitimate use of mental science is towards the strengthening of the will within ourselves or others and bringing it under the control of the enlightened reason. So we want to be able to use our willpower. If you can use your willpower to focus on your thoughts, your ideal, your dreams, you're going to be able to create a spiritual prototype, which creates the DNA, which is going to start to attract the conditions, the places, the things to bring these things into your life. The law of attractions. To concentrate, therefore, means to bring our minds to a condition of equilibrium, which will enable us to constantly direct the flow of spirit to a definitely recognized purpose and then carefully to guard our thoughts from inducing a flow in the opposite direction. So concentration is the ability to put your focus on the spirit of the thing that you want, the purpose, and you're going to be able to draw things to you. In touch with the subconscious mind. The closer our rapport with it becomes, the more what we have hitherto considered automatic action, whether in our bodies or our circumstances, will pass under our control, until at last we shall control our whole individual world. So what I love about this is when we can start to get connected with our subconscious mind and build the rapport with our subconscious mind and understand how it works, what we can do is start to use it and start to take control of our subconscious mind. And by doing so, we're able to shape the conditions and our environment around us. Again, the law of action, the law of attraction, the law of manifestation. For the purpose then of getting in touch with our subconscious mind, we must endeavor to think of ourselves as pure beings. We need to really connect with ourselves as spirit, as that entity which interior supports the outward manifestation. And doing so, we shall realize that the essential quality of pure being must be good. It is in itself pure life, and as such can not desire anything detrimental to pure life under whatever form manifested. Consequently, the purer our intentions, the more readily we shall place ourselves in rapport with our subjective entity. And a fortiori, the same applies to the greater subconscious mind of that which our individual subjective mind is a particular manifestation. In actual practice, the process consists in first forming a clear conception in the objective mind of the idea we wish to convey to the subjective mind. So we need to convey a clear statement that we want to make to the subjective mind. Then, when this has been firmly grasped, we endeavor to lose sight of all other facts connecting with the external personality except the one in question, and then mentally address the subjective mind as though it were an independent entity and impress upon it with what you want it to do or believe. Think about how powerful this stuff is. We're talking about mastery of your mind so that you can master the material conditions around you or the conditions around you. This shit is so powerful. Everyone must formulate his own way of working, but one method which is both simple and effective is to say to the subjective mind, this is what I want you to do. Now you will step into my place and do it, bringing all your powers and intelligence to bear, and considering yourself to be none other than myself. Having done this, return to the realization of your own objective personality and leave it to the subjective mind to perform its task in full confidence that, by the law of its nature, it will do so if not hindered by a repetition of contrary messages from the objective mind. So we're making a simple, concise statement to the subjective mind. This is what we're doing. And by doing this, we just go about our day. We make the statement over to the subconscious mind and we go about our day. And a great way to just practice is before you go to bed at night, let's say you've got a problem to solve. Before you go to bed at night, make a statement. Subconscious mind, I would like you to help me solve this problem, and pose a question to it. This is what's going on. Give me an answer. Then you wake up in the morning, and let's say 50% of the time, if you're good, if not more, you're going to be able to get an answer to that question that you had. Very, very powerful, because the subconscious mind works effortlessly to come up with the actions to be able to produce the result that you want. It is the unvarying law of the subjective life that as a man thinketh in his heart, so he'll be. That is to say, his inward subjective states are the only true reality. And what we call external realities are their objective correspondences. So the physical manifestations around you, the world that you live in, is nothing but a representation of your subjective mind, your subconscious mind. So your subconscious mind is creating the results tangible around you. The environment that you live, the place that you live, the money that you've got, the job that you've got, the world that you're around you is nothing but a result of your subconscious mind. This is very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. This is the law of manifestation, law of attraction. This stuff is the deeper stuff, right? This is so, so deep. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. This is the summing up of the natural law of the relationship between us and the divine mind. It is thus no vain boast that the mental science can enable us to make our lives what we will. You can get whatever you want in your life. This is so, so important to understand because you're connected with the universal mind. We must start from where we are now, and by rightly estimating our own relation to the divine universal mind, we can gradually grow into any conditions we desire, provided we first make ourselves in a habitual mental attitude the person who corresponds to those conditions. For we can never get over the law of correspondence, and the externalization will always be in accord with the internal principle that gives rise to it. So as above, so below, as below, so above. So your subconscious mind is going to create the external realities around you. You need to be in harmony with the things that you want. And to this law, there is no limit. What we can do for us today, it can do tomorrow, and through all the procession of tomorrows, that loses itself in the vistas of eternity. Belief in limitation is the only one thing that can cause limitation, because we thus impress limitation upon the creative principle, and in proportion as we lay the belief aside, our boundaries will expand, and increasingly life will be more abundantly blessing will be ours. So again, the only limitation you have is the ones you impose on yourself, and this comes from the objective mind. The subjective mind individually of yourself, which is connected with the universal mind, which is subjective, is limitless. But what happens is our reason, our judgment, our logic blurs the lines, judges, and then it creates limitation. Our subjective mind, it takes its color from our settled mental habits, and an occasional affirmation or denial would not be sufficient to change it. And we must therefore cultivate the tone which we wish to see reproduced in our conditions, whether the body, mind, or circumstance. So again, Your objective world that you live in, the world that you live in this right now is a reflection of your subconscious mind. You can't just change it by impressing things upon it a couple of times. It needs to be over and over and over again until it's your habitual resting state. Your baseline, the foundation of your subconscious mind, going to create your conditions. So where is that sitting? Where is that sitting? Because based upon where that's sitting is going to create the reality that we live in. The body. Investigation shows that the physical body is a mechanism specially adapted for the transmutation of the inner or mental power into the modes of external activity. So the physical body is nothing but expression of the subjective mind, right? This is important. The soul. He talks about the soul here, but he goes really deep into the intuition. The experience of a long succession of observers shows that the intuition can be trained so as to acquire increased sensitiveness in some particular direction, and the choice of the general direction is determined by the will of the individual. Your intuition can be trained based upon the things that you want in life. The intuition works most freely in that direction in which we most habitually concentrate our thought, and practice it will be found that the best way to cultivate the intuition in any particular direction is to meditate upon the abstract principles of that particular class of subject rather than to consider the particular cases. So we need a particular purpose for our intuition, otherwise it's going to work aimlessly. It's not going to bring things to you that are important. But we need to meditate upon the soul of these things. So you want to learn how to study an art or do something. Meditate upon the soul, the depth of that thing, and it's going to bring to you the intuitive faculties to help you understand this. In its highest workings, intuition becomes inspiration, and certain great records of fundamental truths and supreme mysteries which have come down to us from thousands of generations bequeathed by deep thinkers of old can only be accounted for on the supposition that the earnest thought on the originating spirit, coupled with the reverent worship of it, open the door through their intuitive faculty to the most sublime inspirations regarding the supreme truths of the universe, both with respect to the evolution of the cosmos and the evolution of the individual. So a lot of the greatest things in this world that we have, a lot of the greatest insights, the greatest things that we've created in this world have come through intuition, through meditating on the essence of the universe. If you look at the artist, art isn't just created, it comes through the soul, it comes through the intuition. This is the truth. And this is why art is so powerful, because it's beautiful. The spirit. What must the supreme or originating spirit be in itself? That is the question before us. Let us start with one fact regarding it, about which we cannot have any possible doubt. It is creative. So the spirit that underlies all things is creative, because without the spirit, there'd be nothing here on this physical world that we live in. If it were not creative, nothing could come into existence. Therefore, we know that its purpose or law or tendency must be to bring individual lives into existence and to surround them with suitable environment. So the spirit is creative, and the creative spirit creates human beings, the individual, and it creates their environments around them. It is a creative force. As our consciousness of unity becomes more perfect, so will be the life-givingness of the spirit become more apparent. So the spirit gives life, it gives power, and to the degree of your recognition of the spirit and unity that underlies all things was going to determine how much power you get. But in the realm of the principles of purely affirmative and life-giving nature of the all-originating spirit is an unavoidable conclusion. Now, by what name can we call such an inherent desire to add to the fullness of any individual life, that is, to make it stronger, brighter, and happier? So the spirit is trying to make your life better, yeah? What name can they give to it? If this is not love, then I do not know what else it is. And so we are philosophically led to the conclusion that love is a prime moving power of the creative spirit. So love is a moving force of the spirit. Love, there is nothing but love. I hear people say there is nothing but love. Modern day speak is nothing but love. But expression is impossible without form. We can't express love without form. So there needs to be a form. What form then should love give to the vehicles of expression? By the hypothesis of the case, it could not find self-expression in forms that were hateful or repugnant to it. And therefore, the only logical correlative of love is beauty. So, spirit is nothing but love and beauty. So, spirit is nothing but love and beauty. Guys, that was the Edinburgh Lectures of Mental Science by Thomas Troward. I hope you got value out of this video. If you did, smash like, hit subscribe, drop a comment down below, and I'll see you all next week.